The small county courthouse buzzed with whispers as Jasmine walked through the heavy wooden doors. She pulled at the sleeves of her borrowed blazer, trying to look older than her 16 years. Her mom walked beside her, hand resting gently on her back, a small comfort in this scary moment. "It'll be okay, baby," her mom whispered, but the worry lines around her eyes told a different story. Jasmine nodded, trying to believe it. Just 3 days ago, she'd been helping at a community cleanup event when everything went wrong. She'd stepped between an elderly man and 2 police officers who were getting too rough with him. Next thing she knew, she was slammed against a wall, handcuffed and thrown into the back of a police car, charged with assaulting an officer. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Ramona Howard entered the courtroom. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun, surveyed the room with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. People said Judge Howard was tough but fair. Jasmine hoped those people were right. "Case number 47302, People versus Jasmine Taylor," announced the clerk. Jasmine stepped forward with her public defender, a young man named Mr. Chen who'd met with her for exactly 15 minutes before the hearing. He looked nervous, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact with the 2 officers sitting confidently at the prosecution table. "Your Honor," began the district attorney, a tall woman with a stern expression. "Officers Patel and Rodriguez arrested the defendant after she physically interfered with police business and struck Officer Rodriguez in the chest." Officer Patel nodded along, his partner adding, "She was inciting the crowd, Your Honor. Very aggressive." Jasmine felt her face grow hot. That was a lie. She'd never hit anyone in her life. The only crowd was a group of elderly people and teenagers picking up trash in the park. Judge Howard listened without expression, then said something that surprised everyone. "Before we continue, I've received some evidence I'd like to review. Officer Rodriguez, did you activate your body camera during this incident?" The officer shifted in his seat. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you, Officer Patel?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good," said the judge, picking up a remote. "Then let's see what happened." The courtroom screen flickered to life, showing footage from the officers' cameras. Jasmine watched herself in the video, helping an old man who was struggling with a heavy trash bag. The officers approached, voices raised. When the elderly man tried to explain that he lived in the apartment building across the street, Officer Rodriguez grabbed his arm roughly. That's when Jasmine stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir." "Video," Jasmine said politely. "He's just helping with the cleanup. He lives right there." She pointed to the building. What happened next made people in the courtroom gasp. Without warning, Officer Patel shoved Jasmine against the wall while Rodriguez twisted the old man's arm. Jasmine never raised her hands, never fought back. She just kept saying, "Please stop, you're hurting him." Judge Howard paused the video, her face now like thunder. "Officers, this footage contradicts your written statements and your testimony today. Would you care to explain?" The officers exchanged nervous glances. Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat. "The camera doesn't show everything, Your Honor. She was more aggressive before that part." "Really?" The judge raised an eyebrow and played more footage, this time showing Jasmine and other volunteers picking up trash for a full 5 minutes before the officers arrived. No aggression, no crowds, just community service. The courtroom grew tense as Judge Howard turned off the screen and stared at the officers for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Officers Patel and Rodriguez," she finally said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Approach the bench." The 2 men walked forward, confidence now replaced with unease. "What I've just witnessed is a clear abuse of power and a fabrication of evidence," said Judge Howard. "But before I address that, I have an unusual request." She looked directly at them. "I want you to make Ms. Taylor kneel before this court." A confused murmur spread through the courtroom. Jasmine's mom gripped her hand tightly. "Your Honor?" Officer Patel looked confused. "You heard me," said Judge Howard. "You had no problem forcing this young woman to the ground during her arrest, so I want you to make her kneel here in my courtroom. Now." The officers hesitated, looking at each other with uncertainty. The district attorney stood up. "Your Honor, I'm not sure this is appropriate." "I'm not asking you, counselor," the judge cut in sharply. Officers, this is a direct order from the court. Make Ms. Taylor kneel before us. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room as everyone realized what was happening. The officers reluctantly approached Jasmine, who looked to her lawyer with frightened eyes. Your Honor, Mr. Chen began to object. I don't understand. You will, Judge Howard interrupted, her gaze never leaving the officers. Make her kneel. That's an order. Officer Rodriguez took a hesitant step toward Jasmine. Her mom stood up immediately, placing herself between them. Don't you touch my daughter, she said, her voice shaking but determined. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone watched, barely breathing, as the two officers exchanged glances. Officer Patel reached for Jasmine's arm but stopped when Judge Howard's voice rang out. Freeze. Right there. The officers turned to the judge, confusion written across their faces. Tell me, officers, Judge Howard said, leaning forward over her bench. Why do you think you have the right to force this young lady to her knees? Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat. You ordered us to, Your Honor. And if I ordered you to slap her, would you do that too? The officers didn't answer. I thought so, Judge Howard said, standing up. She was not tall, but at that moment, she seemed to tower over everyone in the room. It's interesting how quick you were to follow an order that would humiliate this young woman, yet you seem to forget that your primary oath is to protect the public. She walked slowly down from her bench, her robes flowing around her as she approached the officers. People in the gallery shifted in their seats, never having seen Judge Howard leave her bench during a proceeding. The body camera footage we just watched shows you forcing Ms. Taylor to kneel on rough pavement for over 8 minutes during her arrest. Judge Howard continued, her voice growing harder. You pushed her down when she was doing nothing but trying to help an elderly neighbor. You made her kneel with her hands behind her back while you took your time handcuffing her, and then you charged her with assault. She stopped directly in front of the officers, looking up at them with fierce eyes. I never intended for Ms. Taylor to actually kneel in my courtroom, she said. That was a test to see if you would follow an unjust order without question, and sadly, you were ready to do exactly that. A buzz of whispers filled the courtroom. Judge Howard turned to address everyone present. Let me be clear about something, she said. What happened in that park was not just about one arrest. It's about power and how it's used. These officers used their power to intimidate and control, rather than to serve and protect. Jasmine stood still, barely breathing, as Judge Howard turned back to look at her. Ms. Taylor, I apologize that you had to experience this moment of fear again, the judge said gently. That was not my intention. I wanted these officers to face the reality of what they did to you. Jasmine nodded, feeling tears well up in her eyes. No adult had ever apologized to her before, especially not someone with as much authority as a judge. Judge Howard returned to her bench, her face now set with determination. Officer Rodriguez tried to speak up. Your Honor, with all due respect, you've shown very little respect so far, officer. Judge Howard cut him off. But please continue. The officer swallowed hard. We were just doing our jobs. Your job, Judge Howard said, her voice like steel, is to protect and serve the community. I saw no protection in that video. I saw no service. I saw 2 armed officers intimidating a teenage girl who was helping her community. The district attorney stood up, trying to regain control of the situation. Your Honor, perhaps we should take a brief recess too. We will not be taking a recess, Ms. Winters, Judge Howard said firmly. What we will be doing is addressing the real issue in this courtroom. She tapped a few keys on her computer and the screen came to life again. This time it showed Jasmine at the police station after her arrest. She was sitting alone in an interview room, still handcuffed, asking repeatedly if she could call her mother. No one came for over an hour. This is not justice, Judge Howard said quietly. This is not what our system is supposed to be. Officer Patel's face had gone pale. Officer Rodriguez was staring at the floor. The district attorney looked increasingly uncomfortable. Your Honor, Mr. Chen, Jasmine's lawyer spoke up. Given this evidence, I move for an immediate dismissal of all charges against my client. Judge Howard nodded. I'm inclined to agree, counselor. But before I make that decision, I want to hear from Ms. Taylor. All eyes turned to Jasmine, who felt her heart pounding in her chest. Her mom squeezed her hand encouragingly. Ms. Taylor, the judge said gently, would you please tell the court in your own words what happened that day at the park? Jasmine took a deep breath and stepped forward, finding her voice at last. Jasmine stood tall despite the fear fluttering in her chest. The courtroom was completely silent as she began to speak. I was just helping Mr. Wilson with his trash bag, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. He's 78 years old and lives across from the park. He comes to all our neighborhood cleanups. When the officers approached us, they were already angry about something. They didn't ask any questions. They just started giving orders. She glanced at the officers who wouldn't meet her eyes. When they grabbed Mr. Wilson, I was worried because he has a bad shoulder. I just asked them politely to be careful with him. That's when Officer Patel pushed me against the wall. Judge Howard nodded. Continue, Ms. Taylor. They kept saying I was resisting arrest, but I wasn't fighting back at all. I just kept asking what I did wrong. They pushed me down to my knees on the gravel and held me there while they called for backup, like I was some kind of dangerous criminal. Jasmine's voice cracked slightly. The worst part wasn't even the arrest. It was the way they talked about me afterwards, like I wasn't even human, like I was just some troublemaker they needed to teach a lesson. Judge Howard looked at the district attorney. Ms. Winters, do you have any questions for Ms. Taylor? The DA seemed conflicted. She looked from the judge to the officers, then back to Jasmine. No questions, Your Honor. Very well, Judge Howard said. Let's continue with the evidence. She pressed a button and new footage appeared on the screen. This time it was from a nearby store's security camera, showing a wider angle of the park. Everyone could clearly see that there was no crowd, no protest, just volunteers cleaning up trash. The footage showed Jasmine helping several elderly residents before the officers arrived. I also have witness statements from 5 residents who were present, Judge Howard said, holding up a folder. All of them contradict the officer's version of events. Officer Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge nodded. We received a call about a disturbance in the park. When we arrived, the dispatch records show no such call. Judge Howard interrupted, holding up another document. I subpoenaed the records this morning. The color drained from Officer Rodriguez's face. In fact, the judge continued, what the records do show is that you and Officer Patel were not assigned to that area at all yesterday. You were supposed to be patrolling the north side of town, so why were you at Oakwood Park? The question hung in the air. Officer Patel looked at his partner, who remained silent. Let me help you, Judge Howard said, pulling out another document. 3 days ago, there was a community meeting where residents complained about police harassment in their neighborhood. Ms. Taylor's mother was one of the speakers at that meeting. She specifically mentioned both of you by name. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Jasmine looked at her mother in surprise. She hadn't known about this. Is this retaliation, officers? Judge Howard asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Were you teaching this family a lesson for speaking up? Officer Patel finally spoke up. That's not what happened, Your Honor. We were just doing our job. Your job? Judge Howard's voice rose slightly. Is it your job to target a teenage girl because her mother exercised her First Amendment rights? Is it your job to file false reports? Is it your job to lie under oath in my courtroom? Neither officer answered. Judge Howard turned to the bailiff. Please call Chief Thompson and tell him I need him in my courtroom immediately. As the bailiff made the call, the tension in the room grew. Jasmine's mom reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. 20 minutes later, Police Chief Thompson walked into the courtroom. He was a tall man with graying hair and a serious expression. He nodded respectfully to Judge Howard. Chief Thompson, thank you for coming on such short notice, the judge said. I've been reviewing some disturbing evidence regarding 2 of your officers. The chief looked at Officers Patel and Rodriguez, his expression unreadable. Judge Howard had the bailiff play all the footage again while the chief watched. When it was over, she handed him the file containing the dispatch records and witness statements. "Chief Thompson, what is the policy in your department regarding body cameras?" Judge Howard asked. "Officers are required to keep them activated during all interactions with the public," he answered promptly. "And what is the policy on making arrests?" "Officers must have probable cause and must use the minimum force necessary," he replied. "And false reports?" The chief's jaw tightened. "Grounds for immediate suspension, possibly termination depending on the circumstances." Judge Howard nodded. "Then I believe you have some decisions to make. These officers violated all those policies. And they did so, it appears, as an act of retaliation against a family that spoke up about police misconduct." The chief turned to look at his officers, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Your Honor," he said, his voice heavy, "I'd like to place both officers on immediate administrative leave pending a full internal investigation." "I think that would be appropriate," Judge Howard agreed. "And Chief Thompson, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges against these officers for filing false reports, perjury, and civil rights violations." The district attorney, who had been quiet for some time, stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to formally withdraw all charges against Ms. Taylor and offer an apology on behalf of my office for pursuing this case." Jasmine felt tears of relief fill her eyes. Her mother put an arm around her shoulders. "Case dismissed," Judge Howard declared. "Ms. Taylor, you are free to go." But before anyone could move, Officer Rodriguez suddenly stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "You're taking the word of a teenage troublemaker over two sworn officers. This is why nobody respects authority anymore." The courtroom fell silent in shock at his outburst. The bailiff quickly moved toward Officer Rodriguez, but Judge Howard raised her hand to stop him. "Let him speak," she said calmly. "I think we should hear what Officer Rodriguez has to say." The officer's outburst seemed to have surprised even his partner. Officer Patel stared at the floor, distancing himself from Rodriguez's anger. "Go ahead, officer," Judge Howard prompted. "You have something to say about respect for authority?" Rodriguez looked around the courtroom, suddenly aware that all eyes were on him. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "This neighborhood has gone downhill because nobody respects the police anymore," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "We put our lives on the line every day, and for what? So people like her can make complaints about us?" He pointed at Jasmine's mother. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Chief Thompson's face darkened. "I see," Judge Howard said quietly. She looked at Rodriguez for a long moment, then turned to face the entire courtroom. "What we're witnessing here is important. This isn't just about one arrest or one incident. It's about a mindset." She stood up, addressing everyone present. "The foundation of our justice system isn't force or fear. It's trust. When officers forget that they serve the community, when they start to think the community should serve them, that trust breaks down." She turned back to Rodriguez. "Officer, you mentioned respect for authority, but respect is earned, not demanded. And it certainly isn't created by pushing a teenager to her knees on a gravel path." For the first time, something like doubt flickered across Rodriguez's face. "The truly concerning thing," Judge Howard continued, "is that you seem to believe your badge gives you the right to retaliate against citizens who speak up. That's not how democracy works. That's not how justice works." Chief Thompson stepped forward. "Your Honor, if I may." The judge nodded. The chief turned to face his officers. "Rodriguez, Patel, turn in your badges and guns. Right now." "Officer," Patel's head snapped up. "Chief, I didn't—" "You stood by," Chief Thompson cut him off. "You were complicit. You lied in your report. You lied under oath." With shaking hands, both officers removed their badges and placed them on the table, followed by their service weapons, which the bailiff collected. Chief Thompson turned to Jasmine and her mother. "Mrs. Taylor, Ms. Taylor, on behalf of the police department, I want to apologize. What happened to your daughter was wrong. The actions of these officers do not represent what we stand for." Jasmine's mother looked skeptical. "With all due respect, Chief Thompson, if that's true, why did your Department push for these charges even after seeing the body camera footage? A hush fell over the courtroom. It was a fair question and everyone knew it. The chief didn't dodge. Because we failed. The system failed. When the complaint came in, it should have been properly investigated instead of being rubber-stamped. That's on me, and I take full responsibility. He turned to Judge Howard. Your Honor, I'd like to request a full review of our departmental procedures, particularly regarding complaints against officers, and I'd like to invite community members to be part of that process. Judge Howard nodded appreciatively. I think that would be a step in the right direction, Chief. She then turned to address Jasmine directly. Ms. Taylor, this court offers you its sincere apology. The charges against you are dismissed with prejudice, meaning they cannot be brought again. Furthermore, I am ordering that all records of this arrest be expunged immediately. Jasmine nodded, tears of relief in her eyes. But there's more, Judge Howard continued. I'm also ordering a full investigation into patterns of conduct by Officers Rodriguez and Patel. If there have been other incidents like this one, we need to know about them. She looked at the district attorney. Ms. Winters, I expect your office to review any previous cases involving these officers where convictions were obtained. If those cases relied on their testimony, they need to be re-examined. The DA nodded solemnly. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Howard then addressed the courtroom at large. Justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it's about correcting injustice, wherever we find it. Today we found it within our own system, and while that's painful to acknowledge, acknowledging it is the first step toward fixing it. She picked up her gavel. This case is dismissed. Ms. Taylor, you are free to go. Officers Rodriguez and Patel, you are to report to Internal Affairs by the end of the day. Court is adjourned. The bang of the gavel echoed through the room. As people began to file out, a local reporter who had been sitting in the back approached Jasmine and her mother. Ms. Taylor, would you be willing to share your story? People need to hear about what happened here today. Jasmine looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, Jasmine said quietly. I think it's important for people to know. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Some were holding signs that read "Justice for All" and "Police Accountability Now." Word had spread quickly about what was happening inside. When Jasmine stepped out with her mother, the crowd broke into applause. An older woman approached and hugged her. Thank you for being brave, she whispered. Jasmine was overwhelmed. She had never thought of herself as brave. She had just tried to help Mr. Wilson that day in the park, but looking at the faces in the crowd, people of all ages and backgrounds coming together, she realized that sometimes standing up for what's right could have an impact far beyond what you ever imagined. 6 months passed since that day in Judge Howard's courtroom. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Oakwood Community Center as Jasmine arranged chairs in a circle. The room was almost ready for the meeting. Need any help with those? A familiar voice asked. Jasmine looked up to see former Officer Patel standing in the doorway. He wasn't in uniform anymore. Instead, he wore jeans and a simple button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Sure, she said. We're expecting about 20 people today. They worked together silently for a few minutes, setting up the remaining chairs. Still feels strange being here with you, Patel finally admitted. After everything that happened, Jasmine nodded. For me too. After the court case, Jasmine's story had spread quickly. The local news covered it first, then national outlets picked it up. People were shocked by the body cam footage and the judge's unusual method of exposing the officer's wrongdoing. Officer Rodriguez had been fired after the internal investigation found 6 other complaints against him. But Officer Patel's story had taken a different turn. The investigation showed he had a mostly clean record before partnering with Rodriguez. He'd been suspended for 3 months and ordered to complete community service, which is how he ended up volunteering at the same community center where Jasmine had started a youth program called Know Your Rights. The program taught young people in the neighborhood about their legal rights during police interactions and other situations. But it had unexpectedly evolved into something bigger, a dialogue between community members and police officers who wanted to rebuild trust. The others should be arriving soon, Jasmine said, checking her watch. As if on cue, the doors opened and people began filing in. Teenagers from the neighborhood, a few elderly residents including Mr. Wilson, Chief Thompson in casual clothes, 2 current police officers, and Judge Howard herself. Quite a turnout today, the judge said, smiling at Jasmine. Everyone took their seats in the circle. Jasmine's mom arrived last, slightly out of breath from rushing over after her shift at the hospital. She now served on the newly formed police oversight committee that Chief Thompson had established. "Thanks everyone for coming," Jasmine began. "Today marks 6 months since we started these conversations. I thought we could talk about what's changed and what still needs work." Mr. Wilson raised his hand. "I've noticed the officers who patrol the park now. They stop and talk to us old folks, ask how we're doing. No more just driving by with the windows up." One of the current officers, Officer Lee, nodded. "The department's new community engagement policy requires us to spend at least an hour each shift walking the neighborhood, having actual conversations. It was awkward at first, but now it's my favorite part of the day." "I appreciate that," said Deshawn, one of the teenagers in the group. "But I still get nervous when I see a police car behind me when I'm walking home from school." Officer Lee didn't get defensive. "That's fair. Trust takes time to build and longer to rebuild once it's broken." Chief Thompson leaned forward. "We've made changes to our training and policies, but changing the culture, that's harder. Having these conversations helps us see blind spots we didn't even know we had." Jasmine's mom spoke up. "The Oversight Committee has reviewed 32 complaints so far. We're seeing patterns we wouldn't have noticed looking at individual cases. That's helping us recommend specific training changes." Judge Howard smiled approvingly. "The court system is changing too. We've started a new diversion program for young first-time offenders, and we're reviewing old cases where officer testimony might have been questionable." Patel had been quiet, but now he cleared his throat. "I was angry at first after what happened in court that day. I felt humiliated. But then I started thinking about how Jasmine must have felt being forced to kneel on that gravel." He looked directly at her. "I'm still learning, but I'm trying to be better." The honesty in the room was powerful. Not everything was fixed, far from it. But real people were having real conversations instead of just pointing fingers. After the meeting, Jasmine was gathering her notes when a young girl, about 12 years old, approached her. "Are you the girl from the news? The one who stood up to those police officers?" she asked shyly. "That's me," Jasmine said with a small smile. "I want to be brave like you when I grow up," the girl said. Jasmine knelt down to meet her at eye level. "You know what I learned? Sometimes being brave just means doing what's right even when you're scared." The girl nodded seriously. "My mom says you change things around here." Jasmine looked around at the people still chatting in small groups, former adversaries now working together, however imperfectly. "We all did," she said, "and we're still working on it." As everyone left the community center, a news van pulled up outside. A reporter Jasmine recognized stepped out with a camera operator. "Ms. Taylor, can we get a statement about today's meeting and about the new police reform bill that mentions your case specifically?" Jasmine smiled. "Sure, but this isn't just my story anymore." She waved everyone over, creating an unexpected picture. The teenager who had been wrongfully arrested now standing shoulder to shoulder with a judge, police officers, community elders, and other teens, all of them working to build something new from the ashes of what had happened 6 months ago. The reporter seemed surprised but pleased. "This is quite a group you've assembled. How did this happen?" Jasmine looked at Judge Howard, who gave her an encouraging nod. "It started with someone in power being brave enough to show us all a different way," Jasmine said. "Judge Howard could have just dismissed my case and sent everyone home. Instead, she made us all face something uncomfortable." Judge Howard shook her head modestly. "I just created a moment of clarity. What happened afterwards? That was all of you." Chief Thompson stepped forward. "The real change happens in these conversations, in these relationships we're building. Policy changes on paper mean nothing without changing hearts and minds." Jasmine's mother put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "And it happens when we refuse to be silenced. when we speak up not just for ourselves, but for our community. The camera captured this unlikely group standing together in the afternoon sunlight, not as a perfect success story, but as a work in progress. A community trying to transform pain into progress, one conversation at a time. As they walked to their cars afterwards, Jasmine asked Judge Howard a question that had been on her mind for months. That day in court, did you plan all that from the beginning, making the officers try to force me to kneel? The judge thought for a moment. I knew something needed to shake them out of their certainty. Sometimes people can't see what they're doing until they're asked to do it to someone else while looking them in the eye. Jasmine nodded. It was scary, but I understand why you did it now. Change is always a little scary, Judge Howard said, but that's how we know it matters. As the sun began to set over the neighborhood, Jasmine looked back at the community center where so many difficult, necessary conversations had taken place. The building wasn't anything special, just brick and glass and steel. But what was happening inside, that was something extraordinary, that was transformation.